Hello, welcome everyone to the second part of the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps episode that we have here on the Ninja Show. In the previous episode, we talked about discovery and we had an overview in general about Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. And we ran a little bit out of time. So now we are back to talk about information protection. We will talk about threat protection as well as app governance. But if you missed part number 1, I really highly recommend you to go to aka.ms/ninja show and go watch the recording. And of course, there's other episodes as well that you might have missed or want to rewatch again. So, of course, I'm back with Caroline. Caroline, thank you so much for being again back on the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. I don't want to leave. It's too much fun.
Perfect. So just a quick recap. I mentioned we talked about discovery. Do you want to just highlight quickly what are the most important things people should know about it?
Absolutely. So in the last episode, like Heike mentioned, we talked about discovery, which is all about seeing all of the SaaS applications in your environment, including the ones that you don't know about, which is also known as shadow IT. So once you've kind of gotten a lay of the land and assess which applications you feel are safe and maybe not so safe for your users, you can implement controls to make sure that users aren't accessing any sort of risky applications. And that also feeds into posture, which we did cover last time too. So ensuring that different applications are following best practices when it comes to, any sort of misconfigurations or anything like that.
Perfect. And I think this is where we basically we looked at connectors.
Mm-hmm.
And then was basically a little bit a transition to the next topic where we say, okay, now we also want to protect the data, information protection. And this is where we are back today. So before we dive into a demo, do we want to discuss a little bit what it is, what people need in order to set this up?
Absolutely. So it's it's a good segue because honestly, all you need to do is connect your applications to Defender for Cloud Apps. And once you've done that, all of the data that lives in those apps will start to feed into Defender for Cloud Apps. So as long as you're following the onboarding steps for each application correctly, you should be good to go when it comes to setup.
Okay, that's awesome. And then what else is required? Like information protection usually comes with like policies and labels and all these things. Do you want to clarify what are the different components that we will then basically touch on and walk the audience through?
Absolutely. So you mentioned policies and labels. We have a ton of built-in policy templates that you can use. So for example, if you've connected Box, we have a specific file policy for Box. And if you also are using Microsoft Purview today, we actually have a direct integration with that service where if you've configured any sort of sensitivity labels, you can actually configure your policies to apply a sensitivity label as well to any sort of file that matches that criteria. And we'll get into that into the demo too, but you should definitely leverage any sort of integrations you have with Microsoft Purview.
Okay, so labels are being created in Microsoft Purview, and then you can use them in Defender for Cloud Apps.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And the policies are independent of a different solution.
Well, actually, there is something called the Unified Policy Experience where you could configure as well in Microsoft Purview. But for third-party applications, we have a breadth of governance actions within Defender for Cloud Apps. So we do recommend for third-party to do it in Defender for Cloud Apps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we want to have a look at it, how it looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. All right, so we're back in Microsoft 365 Defender, specifically on the Files page. So just to give you an overview of this page, we talked about how if you connect applications, you'll see all of the files that live in those applications, which we can see here. The ones that are highlighted in this kind of light red color means that they've already matched to a policy, whereas the ones that are white haven't matched to anything and may not have any sensitive data. But let's take a look actually at a specific application that we talked about, like Box. And let's see kind of the files that we have in here and the different information that we can get straight from the API connector. So again, we have a file here that has matched to a policy. And let's just open this up. And we can see who the owner is, the data was created, modified, the policies it's matched to, and then a URL as well to the file. So this is just the details that we can see and that an admin can use when creating their policies as well. They can also see a collaborator, and maybe it's an external collaborator, or if the file can be publicly accessible. We provide a ton of details here.
So, Caroline, is there a reason why it's red? Red for me is usually a flag. It's like, wow, I mean, it matches a policy, which I would think is good, or is it bad? Like, why is it red?
I would say it depends. I mean, if it's matching to a policy, that generally means there's an alert associated with it. But at the same time, that also means that there's probably a governance action that has happened on that file.
Oh, okay. So it means it matches a policy. Oh, for instance, okay, I think I had it wrong. So it means there is, I don't know, a credit card information in there, or like a password in clear text or something, and that's why it's red. So yeah, okay. I think I just had a different, I don't know, thing that I thought.
No worries. Thanks for clarifying, honestly. Actually, that's a perfect segue. Let's just go into creating a policy, because that is really where you can get a lot of benefits when you connect your applications. So again, I mentioned earlier, we have a bunch of different built-in policy templates. So maybe we want to do something around stale externally shared files. So you'll see that all of the data becomes pre-populated, and then you can actually create additional filters. So maybe you only want to look at files in Box, and then maybe in Office 365. There's a ton of different configurations you can do to really customize to your use case. Again, like all of the other policies within Defender for Cloud Apps, you can select a certain user group, you can apply it to a certain set of files. But what really it comes down to is the inspection method. What we recommend is to use the data classification service. We talked a little bit earlier about that Microsoft Purview integration. The data classification service actually connects directly to the different sensitive information types from Purview. So you'll see that I think we have over 300 now. Yeah.
Before we go, like, what is then the difference? What's the built-in DLP versus the one that you just selected?
That's a great question. So the built-in DLP is actually our legacy inspection method. So we don't really do too much investments in there anymore, whereas the data classification service, we're doing all of our investments. When I first started, we had maybe 150 sensitive information types, and we've doubled that. So we're really trying to make sure that customers have the types that they need in order to configure their policies and address any sort of breaches.
This, of course, depends on when you just joined, if you
Yeah.
say
That's
you
true.
joined
Oh,
20 years ago. No, it was quicker.
yeah, it was like less than 2 years ago. So, and then let's take a look at the different sensitive information types. So you can see we have over 300 sensitive information types. This comes directly from Microsoft Purview. You can break it down into different categories. And then, of course, you can actually use your own custom sensitive information type as well. So in the Purview portal, you can configure the type there, and you'll see it actually feed directly here once it's been configured. So you could add any sort of types here, but depending on how you want to configure the policy. And you'll see those pop up. But let's actually go down to the governance actions. So the applications that we chose, I believe, were Box and then some Microsoft applications. So if this policy matches to a file inside Box, then maybe we want to remove any external users. Maybe we want to apply a sensitivity label, again, coming directly from Microsoft Information Protection. So you could apply a label. There's really a lot of customization you can do with the governance actions. Same thing in the other applications.
And Microsoft Information Protection is now Microsoft Purview.
Exactly. Yeah, it looks like it hasn't been updated here. We should probably send them a note.
No, not everywhere. It takes some time, but just to clarify
Exactly.
that there's no confusion. Good.
Awesome. Okay, so that's kind of an overview of the data at rest information protection policy. We do have another data in motion feature set as well that leverages a reverse proxy, but maybe I'll save that one for next time as it does take a little bit more setup and configuration. But that one is perfect for anyone bringing their own device, I will say.
Okay, so I think, and then I think we wanted to touch during a session, like if you actually use a web application or something like that, that you can then control or set policies for.
Yeah, exactly. So it's called conditional access app control. It's an integration with Azure Active Directory conditional access. So pretty much Defender for Cloud Apps acts as a traffic controller. So if an application is matching a certain set of conditions, like maybe user is bringing their own device, they're accessing something on the corporate network, then we'll go ahead and intercept that traffic and we'll apply controls if they're trying to, download something to an unmanaged device, for example. So, and that happens in real time. But yeah, it's a very interesting feature. We saw a lot of customers opting to use that feature set, especially during COVID, because their employees were all working from home. So they needed an additional set of protections there.
Yes, and conditional access in general is like so powerful. You have like so many ways to really make sure that only secure devices with secure users can securely access corporate data.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so what else do we want to show? So I think we talked about the data in motion, the various controls. You said like remote workforce, bring your own device, and these kind of things.
Let's actually move on to threat protection now because I'm really excited about it. And we have so many new things that we can share. So let's first take a look at some of the policy templates that we have. We have so many policy templates that customers can choose from. And similar to what we saw in the file policy, these come pre-populated. So for example, maybe you want to implement a mass download policy by a single user or get alerted when there's a new high volume application. There's tons of different policy templates. Of course, you can create your own, but these are really good ones for you to get started with.
So that was my question. So if you want to create your own, this is where you go, right? So you go to policy management. I see it. And then you go and create a new one.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great question because we have tons of different types of policies. So you can, it is good to kind of just see what you can do, right? One of the strengths, I would say, of Defender for Cloud Apps is we do have a ton of built-in threat detection policies. And what we do is we pretty much look at all of the users in a customer's environment and we'll establish a baseline for each user. And if we find that suddenly the user deviates from that baseline, we're going to alert you on that. So whether if that's impossible travel activity, whether if that's a risky sign-in, these are all policies that come built in with Defender for Cloud Apps, and that have all migrated over, of course, to Microsoft 365 Defender. But let's actually take a look at the added value that we get by living in this portal. And of course, that's advanced hunting, right? So I'm going to segue over here. And if we look, if we scroll down, we have this Cloud App Events table. So this is all of the data that a customer can use if they wanted to build any sort of queries. Here are all the different variables. And we actually had a blog post come out a couple of months ago about how to hunt for any potentially compromised Azure subscriptions. So I'm literally using a query that we had in that blog where we'll look for users who may have added guest accounts to your tenants. So let's run this really quick and see the results that come up. Perfect. And you'll see all of the different results. And I think the best part of this, and Heike, you can tell me if you hear this as well, is that you can create custom detection rules to do this for you. I think that is truly the power of living in an XDR solution, because you can literally customize and build these detections pertaining exactly to your environment.
Correct. And you can do cross table like with other services if you want to go and include a device
Exactly.
Indicator or something, and then create a detection rule as well as configure specific action that need to be done when that rule hits.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty awesome stuff. The last piece we wanted to talk about today was app governance.
Yeah, of course. Let's have a look at app governance. Sounds good to me.
Awesome. And just a quick one-liner on what app governance is. It's pretty much a capability that we have in Defender for Cloud Apps that specifically looks at OAuth applications. So a lot of the times customers are focused on kind of that user to app interaction where, a user has delegated permissions to an app and then now it becomes an OAuth application. But we talked a little bit earlier about kind of that app to app protection. So what if an app actually has been delegated permissions, and the same scenario, an app has permissions to access another application and start downloading information on behalf of that application. So this is a scenario that we see come up more and more with customers, and app governance fills that gap and fills that need.
And again, as we talked in the first episode for Defender for Cloud Apps, this is not just part of it. This is an add-on, right?
Exactly.
Just to clarify. Okay.
Yep.
And can customers just find the opportunity to activate this add-on within the portal, or how would they get that?
So there is a trial available that it's a free trial that they could use just to kind of dip their toe in app governance and see, honestly, just what's exposed. And at that point, make the decision of whether or not they do want to add it on to Defender for Cloud Apps. OAuth applications are becoming a backdoor when it comes to incidents and kind of that supply chain of attacks. So we, of course, recommend taking a look and just trying it out and seeing if it works for your use cases. All right, so here we have our app governance dashboard. Right away, we can see a number of different insights here, such as overprivileged applications, highly privileged applications, the incidents, policies, threats, all of these different types of insights here. And before we actually take a look at the OAuth applications in this specific environment, I kind of want to start from an incident so we can see exactly the power of app governance. Okay, so here we see that an app made unusual search activities. Again, this incident view should be familiar to all of you now since all of the alerts kind of roll into incidents. And if we take a look at this specific alert, I love M365 Defender because it has this classify alert button, and being able to write notes when an alert may be a false positive is probably one of my favorite things. I'm just going to throw that out there. But I love that you can actually see the how it maps to the MITRE ATT&CK framework. You can see when it was generated. And then, of course, you get a description of the alert and the application that triggered this alert. And if we take a look at Microsoft Graph, again, we get additional details here, like the data usage, maybe the users who are accessing this application. We can see it's over 3,000 unconsented users. And then here, which is the permissions that this application actually has. So they have 5 delegated permissions to it, relatively low, but enough to trigger an incident like we saw earlier.
So those are permissions that are being given to that application.
Yep, exactly. So similar to
Within the application, like it's nothing that has been configured here. It was done in the application, and because of the connector integration, we see all that information.
exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And again, we get a list of all of the OAuth applications in this specific environment. We can see the alerts. And then, of course, we have the built-in policies like every other area of Defender for Cloud Apps. You can create a new policy. You'll see all the ones that this one has configured in the environment. And highly recommend using the built-in policies. They're very robust, especially in app governance.
So what is a policy? Is this connected with an action, like basically, or is it a warning? Is it if you see this and this, then do this and this, or what is a policy?
So it's 9 times out of 10 connected with an action, and it's usually disabling that application. So if we look at one, let's just do a permissions one, an overprivileged application, right? Again, pre-populates all the information for you. I'm just going to go with the default settings. And then this is the action, which be disabling the application. We actually show all of the registered applications in Azure Active Directory. So it'll actually disable that application, prevent a user from accessing and signing into that app.
So, but of course, before you do all of this, I guess everybody should get familiar with app governance, check out all the apps, make yourself familiar with what are the permissions and actions and all of these things, because I was like, it's a lot, right? So you showed me the dashboard with like lots of overprivileged or super privileged or whatever you call them, a lot of details for us to consume and get a good understanding. I think we will probably put a link somewhere here around the documentation for app governance so people can learn more details about it.
And we have the webinar that we did as well, which we showcase how app governance maps to zero trust principles. And we'll literally walk you through an attack and how it matches to how it aligns to zero trust. So there's tons of resources out there when it comes to app governance. And yeah, we'll link all of those in the chat.
Good. So I think that's it from a demo perspective. And I thought you had some final words, some final pictures for us to basically bring that baby home.
So just to kind of reinforce our SaaS security story here at Microsoft using Defender for Cloud Apps, we covered discovery, we covered SSPM and following those best practices. We took a look at information protection and the different governance actions you could apply to a policy. We talked about threat protection and looked at a specific custom detection you could build. And then lastly, we end it with app-to-app protection, which is, of course, featuring our add-on app governance. So let's talk about maybe some resources that you all could leverage. We have a fabulous Defender for Cloud Apps overview video where we walk through Defender for Cloud Apps now that it's in Microsoft 365 Defender at a higher level. We have all of our blogs. We've been pumping out blogs over the last couple of months, so highly encourage you all to take a look at those. And then, of course, our technical docs, which cover every bit of every detail of Defender for Cloud Apps. If you ever have any questions, that's usually my go-to. So yeah, thank you all so much.
That's awesome. So we will put all the links in the chat window so people can access them pretty quickly.
Yep.
And yeah, thank you so much, Caroline, for actually a 2-part deep dive into Defender for Cloud Apps. I really appreciate your time and preparation that you put into those episodes. And I hope I will have you back one day to be another expert on my show when we talk about something new that comes up in Defender for Cloud Apps.
I love it. Let's do a part 3, 4, 5. Let's keep this going. I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, thank you. And thanks everyone for watching. Again, if you missed an episode, go to aka.ms/ninja show. Please also use the forum, share your voice if you have feedback, comments, anything you would like to share with me or the experts or the product team or whatever. Please use that forum. And with that, see you next week when we have another episode for you. Bye bye.